right, friends, we need to have a quick chemistry lesson. And you might say to me, but Mrs. Coleman, why? Why do we need a chemistry lesson? This is ecology. We don't have to talk about chemicals when we're talking about the ecology of the trees and the plants and the animals and all that. Can't we please not talk about this? And to you, I will say, no, we must talk about it, because all these trees and foxes and birds and frogs and people and grasses and flowers are made out of chemicals, and they are nourished by chemicals. And so we need to understand a little bit of chemistry to be able to understand some really fundamental things about ecology. Okay? So, having preached that to you, we need to know some terms. If we go back, we were talking about energy, and then we were talking about autotrophs. And we said autotrophs were organisms that were able to make their own food. They were able to capture energy in some way. Let's focus on photosynthesizers for a minute. They capture light energy and use it to build food molecules from littler molecules, okay? So the light energy is what helps them to put little bitty inorganic molecules together into big complicated organic molecules like sugar, okay? Like a little kid building a Lego tower, okay? Now, since we said that, let's talk about what exactly we mean when we're talking about organic versus organic versus inorganic compounds, okay? So, atoms, molecules, bonds, inorganic, organic, we need to know all of these terms, okay? An atom, if you will recall, is the smallest unit of any element that still has all the characteristics of that element, okay? So, obviously, the question leads to, well, what's an element? If you'll remember, an element is a pure substance that is composed of only one type of atom. For example, this is a gold bar, and it is pure gold. It is made up of only gold atoms, or at least I'll assume that for the sake of argument. The periodic table, if you'll recall from previous science classes, is a table that lists all of the different elements that exist on Earth as far as we know, okay? And there's an image of that periodic table. So each of these represents a different type of atom, really. And if you've got just one atom, you don't have very much of the element, but if you've got a bunch of them, you've got a big sample of the element, okay? So, please do not stress over the periodic table. We are not going to learn all about the periodic table. That is chemistry, but do understand. So, molecules is another word we need to know. So, a molecule, as you probably already know, is two or more atoms that are chemically bound together. But a molecule is the smallest piece of a compound that still retains all the characteristics of that compound. So, what's a compound then? A compound is two or more elements that are chemically combined, okay? So, if we take hydrogen and oxygen separately, hydrogen is a gas. It is very flammable. Oxygen is another type of gas, also very flammable. But we chemically combine hydrogen and oxygen into H2O, and we have water. And all of a sudden, not only is water not flammable, but it will put out a fire and so on. So the properties of a compound may be completely different from its individual components that make it up. Okay, so there's our water molecule. The red atom is the oxygen, and the two white atoms are hydrogens, and water is really important for life, so we're going to be talking more about that later. So, a chemical bond then is a force that holds atoms or molecules together. So if we go back here, there's a chemical bond that exists between the hydrogen and the oxygen here, and the hydrogen and the oxygen there. There's a chemical bond, okay? So the forces that hold atoms and molecules together. And we'll talk more about different chemical bonds later on. Okay? Now we're going to get into this whole organic versus inorganic deal. And this is important for our conversation we've been having about autotrophs. Okay? Living things are essentially made of organic molecules. Okay? Organic molecules are big, complex molecules, and they have some very famous names: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, so on, DNA. All of those are organic compounds, organic molecules, okay? Organic molecules tend to be very large, made up of hundreds or even sometimes thousands of atoms. And thus, they also tend to be complex. So when you hear the word organic, you need to think large, you need to think complex. You need to think the Lego tower, not an individual Lego block, but the Lego tower, okay? Very complex. Living things are made of organic compounds, and they require them to fuel their body's activities, okay? So they require organic compounds to have the energy to do things, to run. We burn organic compounds as an energy source, but we also use them as building blocks to actually build our bodies, and that's really scary bodybuilding there, but we use them as building blocks to build our bodies with. So not only do we use them for energy, but you are physically made of this stuff, these organic compounds. Now, what does it mean to be inorganic then? Living things also must have inorganic compounds, but these compounds tend to be small and simple. They tend to be just a few atoms in size, not hundreds of atoms in size. So an example, a great example of an inorganic molecule that is really important to life is good old H2O, water. You don't get much more simple than this. It's a hydrogen, and an oxygen, H2O. Very small, very simple. But we all know that water is essential for life, and we'll talk about why that is later on. But that's an inorganic compound. Oxygen, O2. Written O2, one oxygen atom, two oxygen atoms, held together with a chemical bond. Absolutely critical for life. We use oxygen to burn food to get the energy out of it. Absolutely imperative, at least for most life forms. Some life forms don't need oxygen, but certainly we need oxygen. Hold on just a second. Let me erase. There we go. All right. And of course, another inorganic compound that is absolutely essential, especially if we're talking about photosynthesis, okay, is carbon dioxide, CO2. One carbon there in the middle and two oxygens, one on either side. CO2 is used, if you'll remember the photosynthetic equation, if you've ever learned that before, CO2 plus H2O water is going to give us glucose, as long as there is light also there to help fuse the water and the CO2 together, to give the energy to build the big Lego tower that is glucose, okay? So, fundamentally, organic compounds are something that living things need, like water, like CO2, like oxygen. Actually, I lied. I'm telling you about inorganic compounds right there. Hold on. Let me back up again. Oh, Coleman screwed up. All right. Organic compounds are something that living things need. For example, you need protein to survive. You need carbohydrates to survive. Those are both big organic compounds, complex, and you eat meat and you eat bread and stuff to get those compounds. But it's also something that we make. We make protein. Our bodies are actually made of protein. We make DNA. It's our genetic material. Okay? And of course, as I said, it's something that we are made of. Muscle. Your muscles are almost pure protein. Now, inorganic compounds are something that we need. Now, this is where we need water and CO2 and H2O and stuff. I just said that. I'm sorry, O2. There we go. Something that but they generally don't make it for their own use. Usually living things have to get inorganic compounds from their environment. For example, we have to get O2 from our environment. We don't make it. Plants have to get CO2 from their environment, generally speaking, okay? Although plants are a little bit different. They can produce O2 and CO2 simultaneously. We'll talk more about that when we talk about photosynthesis, okay? So, inorganic compounds are something that living things can contain. For example, your cells are full of water, but they don't really, water doesn't build your actual body, the structures of your body. It's more like air in a balloon puffing it up, but it's not building the actual balloon, if you get my drift. So water is filling up your cells, but it's not building the actual cell, okay? So, now, photosynthetic autotrophs, getting back to our autotroph discussion then, the best known autotrophs are the photosynthetic ones. There are other autotrophs like the chemosynthesizers at the deep sea vents, but the ones that we will spend most of our time talking about are the ones that chill out up here on the surface of the earth with us and do photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is using energy from light to convert carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and sugar. Okay? This is the equation you should know. And it's not balanced. If you did some balancing of equations in a previous science class, this is not balanced. We're not going to worry about that here. We can worry about that in chemistry next year, okay? Light plus CO2 plus H2O, the little inorganic building blocks, will be combined using the energy of light. They will smash together and create sugar that is used and O2 that is given off by plants as a waste gas. But it's not really wasted because guess who uses it? We do. And also the plants will use it as well. Okay? The main land autotrophs, the main autotrophs on land are plants like grasses and trees and bushes and all of that. The main aquatic autotrophs are algae, like what you've already messed around with in our aquarium. And in tidal flats, places where there's marsh and mud and things like that, photosynthetic bacteria is a really important contributor to the producers in that environment as well. Okay? All right. I'll go ahead and do this last little bit on chemosynthesis and knock that out. Making food without using light, energy is obtained from the chemical bonds of the inorganic molecules in the environment. So instead of using sunlight, basically little inorganic molecules, very often something called hydrogen sulfide that is spewed out from the earth itself at places like deep sea vents, is used, broken down, and energy is released, and that energy is used to create food molecules, okay? Some bacteria can do this, and some bacteria that are in places other than deep sea vents. Bacteria that, I don't want to confuse you, so I'm going to leave it at that, okay? So, chemosynthesis is also important, but generally speaking, up here where we're hanging out, it's not quite as overwhelmingly as important to us as all this green stuff that's going on around us in the photosynthesis, okay? All right, I'm going to stop there and we will talk about heterotrophs in the next podcast. All right, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.